Right. Welcome to this session of territory and motivational mapping with myself and Anthony. How are you today, Anthony?
Extremely well, thanks. Thanks for this opportunity. It's great,
Yeah,
and
looking forward to it. Yeah.
created my
So
own motivational map, so it's really helpful. So thank you.
we're going to talk about my bit of which is motivational maps, and then we're going to hear from Anthony. He's going to tell a bit about his journey and how territory mapping can help you in your business to find your way. I suppose with any mapping thing, it's about having a direction, knowing where you're heading, and having something that's going to help you get there. So, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to be talking first about motivation and where that fits in. So let's just start the ball rolling by just thinking about what we need from our work. Well, essentially, we need three things. We need a direction. We've got to set that direction. And when I talk about this to my clients, business owners, in many respects, this is about the problem that they want to solve, the thing that they want to solve. And in most businesses, well, pretty much every business is set up to solve some sort of problem. So that's the direction. The next thing we need to have the skills and knowledge to be able to do that. So that's essential. We can't solve a problem unless we have the skills and knowledge and know how. So that's essential. But the third element, and which is often not, no attention is paid to it whatsoever, is motivation. And motivation is key in that it is our reason for doing something. It's our reason to do everything we do. It's the reason we get out of bed in the morning, and understanding our motive, which is our reason to take action, which is the reason we do everything. So these things are really important to get right. Understanding the direction it's heading, understanding skills you need to do what you want to do with your business, and ultimately also understanding the motivation, because the motivation will keep you going. The motivation is the energy that we need to get over those bumps in the road. And when Anthony talks about his journey, you'll hear about the swamps and the hills and mountains that we've got to cross as a business, and that's what's going to help us to do that. So these three elements, they work with one another. Our skills are obviously, as I've mentioned, are dependent on the problem that we want to solve. Motivation is key to those two things, and it all interacts together. So one doesn't work independently. It's all about being interdependent with the three items, making sure we've got all three well covered. So essentially, what I'm talking about here is the what of our business, the how we do things, and why we do things, why we get out of bed, why we bother in the first place, why it matters. And those are the things that are key to our success long term. We can set up a business to do something that we haven't got much motivation around for a short amount of time. But if you want to go the long haul and you really want to be successful, then you've really got to tap into the motivation going forward, and making sure that as time changes, as things change, your motivations are likely to change as well. So we've got to make sure that we keep tabs on that. So there are 9 reasons we go to work, and a tool that I use, and we've mentioned already, is Motivational Maps. And Motivational Maps gives us a language with regards to motivation, and it also allows us to measure motivation. And once we can measure something, we can then work on improving it. And if we can improve something, then and it's connected to an important part of our business, then that should improve our productivity and performance, and ultimately our profit of our business. So what's this language? Well, these are the 9 reasons why we go to work, and I'll quickly go through the 9 motivations. Firstly, there's the defender. There's 3 relationship motivators. This is the first one, the defender. That's about security, stability, and predictability. This is the drive for that. The second one is friend. That's the drive for belonging, fulfilling relationships. And then the third relationship motivator is the star, which is the drive for recognition. So they're the 3 relationship motivators. There are 3 achievement motivators. One, the top one there being director. So that's the drive for being in charge, responsible for resources, and having responsibility for people. The second achievement motivator is the builder. This is the drive for money, material satisfaction. So you'll notice that when we come to work, only one of the things that we come to work for is money. So it is important, but it's not, in most cases, the most important thing. But we've got to pay enough attention to it, and we'll talk about paying enough attention to things in a second. And then thirdly, the third achievement motivator is the expert. So that's the drive for expertise, specialism, and being an expert in what you do. And then finally, the 3 growth motivators. The top one there is the creator. So that's the drive for innovation, creativity, and bringing new ideas into a business. Then there's the spirit. That's the freedom and autonomy drive. So independency is a key driver for someone that has a high spirit drive. And then finally, and by no means least, the searcher motivator, which is all about making a difference. We're going to talk a little bit more, well, a lot more about that, I'm sure, because we are going to share with you Anthony's results in a short while. And searcher is important, particularly important to Anthony and to myself as well. So those 9 motivations, what do we do? How does it work? So it's an online diagnostic, Motivational Maps. It takes about 10, 12 minutes to complete. What it allows us to do is it gives us an opportunity to give a value to each of the 9 motivators. As you see here on the screen, it puts them in an order by giving them a score or a value. Then we can put them in order of importance. So the most important was on the left there for this person, and this person is searcher driven. And down the bottom, the least important, and this person's least important driver is the star. So once we have those in an order, we can then think about, well, how does that work out with regards to our business? If we're a business owner, we've got to make sure that we're the most motivated person. So we've got to make sure those things are being met in our role. And I see a lot of times when the clients I work with is that they're not paying enough attention to those motivators that are important to them. And ultimately they create the role that is completely wrong for them. And so we want to make sure we avoid that. But we also want to make sure that those lowest motivators, or the least important motivators, are not becoming Achilles heels for them. In other words, preventing them from creating the success that they really want from their business. So this is really important. Obviously, you can see how motivations drive everything, and everything that we do is dependent on motivation, because not much happens without it. So as I said, concentrating on our most important motivators firstly, but not ignoring the fact that we have our lowest motivators that come into play, because if they're not being met, or if we're not paying enough attention to them and they're important to our business, then that can become a problem for us going forward. So here we are. So we've got to Anthony's map. Hopefully he's got some things to say about this. Anthony completed a map a few weeks ago, Motivational Map, and this is his results. And so just talking you through what's on the screen. On the left-hand side is the searcher motivator, by far the most important for him. So doing something meaningful or worthwhile is a very strong drive. And you can see that his score is over that dotted line of 30, which any score over 30 is something that's really driving you and has to be met in your day-to-day sort of working life. Secondly, there's the creator. So innovation, new ideas is another drive for Anthony. And you're going to see how he has created something really quite exciting and innovative with regards to a business in a minute when he shares his journey, how creative he's been with that, and how hopefully inspiring that might be to you. And then thirdly, the friend. So belonging is key. And again, that sort of fits in with his story that you're going to hear about with regards to being part of something, and being part of something bigger with which is connected to other people is key. Um, so they're the top three motivators. But as I said, it's not just about the top three motivators. It's understanding what those lowest motivators might be causing us a problem. And I think one of the things that Anthony realised from his map is that his lowest motivator being defender, which is extremely low score, it's almost non-existent, is the defender. So when you look at his map, you'll see in the top there, the searcher and creator are all about new things and growing and changing things. His lowest motivator is the thing that keeps things the same. So stability, predictability. So what we have here is almost like a double whammy where change is the drive and predictability and putting processes in place for stability is probably the least important thing. And that has implications. And you'll also notice that the next lowest motivator, the builder, that's also below that 10 dotted line, is quite low as well. So money is not a driver either. But we know money is important to a business. There has to be a money supply. Otherwise, businesses don't survive. So that's my quick analysis of Anthony's results. Have you got anything to add to that? What I've just been through?
No, not really. It's got me in an absolute. You've got me in one. And I think looking at what do I have to protect and how we can work together. Because obviously, once we sit down with my territory map and your territory map, we can start to see where the overlap is and what one has to do to defend. Because always seeking really is not the answer. I can tell you after 70 years of doing it. Or 72 years, that really one's got to start protecting and defending more, which is the core part of one of the icons I use. So, no, it's completely relevant. The question is, how does one use it? And I think this is where I'm really interested in how we can partner, how we can work with clients, because I believe we can find the context and where on people's territory maps do they really need to be more protected or where do they need to seek more. So I think we can provide more context to those observations, which to me I find really, really revealing, interesting and to be discussed further. So no, very happy about that.
And then one of the things I've been talking about more and more recently is the motivation is our will to do something, and if we haven't got the will, then that's going to prevent us from our success. So we have to balance this out with the things that we want to do, with the things that we need to do, and if we're not doing the things that we need to do, and I think that's probably your biggest insight from your map is understanding how to do that. And in most cases, it's finding people that do want to do those things. When you get a team scenario, it's understanding that we need to get a team which is blended together with different motivations, doing different roles because they have different priorities, and getting all those things taken care of is essential. Otherwise, if we don't pay enough attention to those things, then we just go off on a tangent and we're obsessed with change and we don't create the stability, in your case, that we need, because everyone needs a certain amount of stability. Okay, so I've written a book about motivation, which you can check out. You can find it on Amazon, and you can contact me. It's available on my website, Motivated it's called. And in that book, I share a 7-step process where motivation is key, and understanding how you move through the measure process from understanding yourself through to how to motivate a team in the future. So that is my quick run through of motivation and how we can measure and maximize motivation. So while I just change some tech, because I need to change the presentation on my screen, anything you have to say, Anthony, before we start on?
Yeah, don't jump into my presentation just yet, if you don't mind. I'll just like to introduce and say, look, thank you all very, very much for coming here today. And Mark, thank you for organizing this. Today, talking about territory maps, I mean, what relevance can a 70 or someone in his 8th decade really be to you? I've lived a life of privilege, but I've also spent a journey of exploring really what's important in life. And what I've come up with are a few icons of what I've learned from my time with indigenous communities around the world. And it's really around to know what is it we're hunting in our lives. You know, not I want to get a Ferrari. It's what is that recognition that we want? What is that sense of identity? And far more importantly, is what is that community that we're building within ourselves? You know, who really sits around the fire with you? Who do you really trust and say, this is my dream, this is my ambition? What is it that we want to grow in our lives? And then, as Mark so clearly points out, what are we protecting? What is that capital, that cattle? And that's not the capital of the amount of money. It's really our intrinsic capital of who we are and how do we grow it. And that's been my journey. My life has really been around how can we use natural wisdom and clear, simple icons and metaphors that have been with us since time began, way before civilization, way before probably we became humans. I mean, a pride of lions know exactly what they're hunting, protecting, and growing. And it's us who really, we're lost. Why do we like soccer? Because we know we're protecting the goal, we're hunting goals, and we're defending. What are we growing? The team, the identity, the brand. But a lot of times, I think in businesses, people have no context. They really don't know the rivers, mountains, and swamps. So what I'd love to do today is to tell you a little bit about my background. I'm eighth generation expatriate. I was brought up in Africa, in the Sudan. I remember the paddle steamers down the Nile. I remember coming home with sort of pet scorpions that have had their tail cut off and sort of, mummy, look at my pet scorpion, which didn't go down well. But, you know, within a week or two of absolute freedom, I was dropped into an English boarding school. And all of a sudden, the first morning, I remember so well, someone came running after me and said, your hospital bed corner, your hospital bed corner. Oh God, someone's died. I mean, you know, someone's been eaten by a scorpion or bitten by a scorpion. No, it was that I hadn't folded over the corner of my bedsheet correctly. And I just spent 10 years completely and utterly robbed of what was the point of doing anything. Why did we do something? What was the reason? How could I belong? How could I be recognized? What was my identity? And I realized within that system, it was zero. My final freedom was when my housemaster took me aside and said, Anthony, let's look at your future. Let's get one thing quite clear, though. You're far too stupid to go to university. I thought, wow, this is freedom. This is the beginning of it. Would I like to go to America for a year? So I went to America for a year and I hitched 30,000 miles across. I hitched my private aircraft to the Bahamas. I hitchhiked. And for the first time in my life, I felt that sense of freedom. That freedom from Africa had come back to me. And I never wanted to lose it again. So I came back to England. And with Ted Heath's government and all the rest, I'm sure none of you remember that. But, you know, enthusiasm was still a certifiable mental disorder in this country. And I thought, I've got to get away. I've got to go and do something that gives me this sense of enlightenment and passion. So I saved money. I had a stall on the Bayswater Road. I certainly wasn't given any cash. I saved up just enough money to buy a one-way ticket on the Trans-Siberian Express to Japan. Arrived in Yokohama by boat and spent the next sort of 30 years of my life. But, you know, after about 5 years, I'd become really reasonably successful. I had a gold Rolex. My Rolex was bigger than my father's Rolex. And I thought, wow, I've arrived. But then actually a girl told me to get knotted, which was absolutely deserved. And I suddenly couldn't eat, drink, sleep. I was miserable. And it started to make me think, what is it that motivates us? What is it that gives us a sense of identity, purpose, passion, and power that is within us, that can't be taken away, that can grow? And what I discovered was if I went skydiving or played a good game of rugby, I started feeling more that sense of community and identity. And I became fascinated. Why aren't we taught this? Why don't we actually know what this is? So I started going off on a series of different journeys, and this is where I started to really be inspired by people I met on indigenous communities, etc. And if you don't mind, Mark, would you mind putting up a few slides, please? That
Yeah,
would be
certainly. Just bear with me a second.
yeah. As I say, I'd like to welcome you in the adventure. This is Emmanuel Mankura looking across his territory. He has absolute clarity of who he is, his identity, his sense of purpose, his wealth. And that is really how it started making me think about different things. And that was really once I started going off on this camel safari in northern Kenya. Now, I thought I was, this wild African sort of explorer, but I got lost a couple of times and I was terrified that I'd be eaten by lions. On another occasion, I sort of went through a water hole and actually I went back the next day and there were two huge crocodiles lying where I had gone through. And I realized that I was terrified by the unknown, by the unexplored. But each evening, the Maasai would sort of just wander through the bush. And what I saw is they had absolute substance without arrogance. And I realized my entire education was how can I be arrogant without substance? And I saw this difference. Our education, the West, is arrogance. And my school actually also taught effortless insincerity. But I came fascinated about seeing people who had this sense of confidence. And I thought, why aren't we taught confidence? Why aren't we taught pride in who we are in our community? Why do we focus on these exams that ultimately give us nothing? And I remember this time sitting around with the Maasai around the fire. And I said, so who is the leader here? They simply said to me, everybody in our community is a leader. Just tell us the problem and we will tell you the most appropriate person. And again, it made me think how we focus so much on one person having to know the answers. Why don't we bring people around so they can start to see how they contribute? So they can start to realize that if you contribute to your community, if you have the power of your personality, the wealth of your life experience, and the status of your contribution. And I saw exactly the same thing when I was in Mongolia. These are the Mongolian horsemen coming towards me. But it was fabulous being in Mongolia with them. And I joined them on a migration. And this migration was for 5 days, 120 miles through the Altai Mountains. It was about minus 35, and we were riding for about 8 to 12 hours a day. It was cold, but it was fabulous being around people who knew what they were doing, why they were doing it, moving their wealth. They knew what they were motivated. They knew what they were protecting. And as you see, it was cold. We had wolves who might attack their animals. And you can see that they've got, as I say, armed to keep us away from wolves. But on the third day, the weather started really getting pretty bad. And by nightfall, it was a full-blown storm. And while I sort of lay in bed warm, keeping warm and thinking how brave I was, some of the horses had escaped. And as I say, this is a storm in the middle of the night. It must have been minus 30, 40, 50 with the wind chill. But at that point, the patriarch went out and looked after the horses. He went out there. He didn't expect any praise. He didn't expect anything. He knew his responsibilities. And what I saw is whether I'm in Mongolia or whether I'm in Africa, everything really is around how do you actually build a community? What is that essence of what we really, really want to create? And this is what I think we've forgotten. Because what I learned when I was in Papua New Guinea from an amazing man called Joseph Nombre, and the next photograph is of him. He remembers first contact, and he invited me to his village in the highlands of Papua New Guinea back in 1981. And he said, "Come and see what we've got." I said, "What have you lost? What have we lost?" And he said, "I really don't know. But this is when I saw people who had absolutely nothing apart from a sense of identity and pride." Now, I'm not saying we should immediately go back and live like this, because all hierarchies, in my opinion, are evil. Whether it's the English public school system or the banking system here, hierarchies are bad, and they're normally about empowering men to to be in control of women and the whole system of wealth. They're evil. So what I think we need to do is to look at what is the freedom of choice we have to shape our destiny. And when I asked the ambassador what was the single most important thing in his life, he said, "It is my territory." He drew a map of his territory and he said, "Let me show you. This is my duty. My duty is to protect the ground. My duty, this is what has been handed down to me. My ambitions is to protect and strengthen the community." So what it made me realize that for the first 99.9% of human existence, we've known our territory. And therefore, what I think is, how can we know who we are if we don't know what we're doing? Because this is what I've discovered in all of us, whether in Mongolia or elsewhere, is everybody can draw a map. They can draw those rivers, those mountains, and the swamps of how they see their lives. And once you can start to see it as a map, then you can start to see what you need to do in your life. So what I started to do was to go off on a series of different journeys, because what I wanted to see is really, how can I unlock in myself to earn the spear, to hand out the feathers, and to tap into a sense of identity? How could I find that identity in a world where it's really not appreciated? So what I started to do was to go on a series of different journeys and expeditions, and here are some photographs of them. I started wandering off, and I started to organize these trips, whether it was into the Taklamakan Desert or whether it was a short trip to the North Pole in summer, which I stress was not very dangerous at all, or going off on journeys in Mongolia and Papua New Guinea. We had 24 bottles of wine and no food on this trip. But what I started to see was you could bring people together. You could give them a clear goal of a mountain. You could give them a set of objectives. And much to my amazement, people would always step forward. But what they wanted was this sense of clarity, the fact that they knew who they were, that they were trusted. And this gradually evolved into a business of taking people on these different journeys, because I wanted to unleash in people a sense of purpose, passion, pride, and the idea ultimately to unlock trust and willpower, because I thought that is ultimately what we're really missing in our own lives. So I opened a training center on the Great Wall of China in Japan, pioneering outdoor teamwork. And as I say, we found this phenomenal center on the Great Wall to bring people there, to build trust, to tear down the walls between organizations and individuals. And on this, it was fabulous. We even did some team building for Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and they came with their families and some of the early people of Microsoft. This was November 1995, so just at the beginning. But it was amazing being with them, and really starting to bring teams together. But what I saw is that you can build a team quite easily. You bring them together, and I started to hear people say, "Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? What is my motivation? Why don't I get recognized? Why? And I started to think, what is it that they're missing? And I started to use the Great Wall as a metaphor. I started to get people to think about the barriers. And then Thomson Reuters were getting together, and the head of Thomson, a chap called Dan Vedetto in Tokyo, said, look, we're working with Thomson and we're working with Reuters. We know nothing about each other whatsoever. So I gave them a blank sheet of paper. And I said, can I try something? I really was at a loss. How can you build a team of people who don't know each other? Trust is not even there because they don't know each other. So I asked them a question. And I said, look, each of your teams, what are you hunting? What are you protecting? And what are you growing? And for me, it was an amazing moment in my life because I suddenly saw deep inside everybody, in these people, they were Japanese, Australians, Americans, and others. I saw a recognition that everybody could talk about the mammoths they're hunting, the fish. And once they saw it, they said, oh, Thomson said, yes, we know the roads to these animals. They're our clients. And they could build a partnership. So what I've been doing for the last 25 years is to tap into these instincts that we all have and tap into this lack of ability to understand what is driving us and what is motivating us by asking people to draw maps, to give people blank sheets of paper and say, where are you? Where are you trying to get to? And I've discovered it doesn't matter who we're with. Everybody can start to explain what their territory is. And once you know someone else's territory, you can then start to work together. How can we contribute? How can we help each other? What are we proud of? What are the problems we need to solve? And by asking people these simple questions, we build trust. Because people realize that they're being listened to. They understand their community, their culture, their hopes and their beliefs, that other people are concerned about them. And business has simply evolved from the tribal ways of doing things. So whether we're working in Taiwan with an organization bringing the very, very best of the leadership organization to overcome challenges, to motivate, to let people feel part of a cross-cultural community, that is where it was so important. Or whether we're in Vietnam working at a conference, how do we bring out the best practice? How do we become the best hunters, not of hunting the greatest sales, but how do we hunt becoming the world's greatest company for values and identity? And this works just as well whether I'm in a major corporation or at a center in Wrexham for people with great challenges. This woman here drew these different maps. She could then talk about pride, what she had achieved, what she'd done, what her hopes were. And then she could start to articulate how she could help people. Because I think deep, deep inside all of us is we want to help. But the biggest barrier, whether it's working with school children or executives, is that self-confidence. How do we cross those rivers? But what I've discovered, as I say, whether it's with school children, with the Gates Foundation, people can start to tell their narrative. And once you know the confidence, the bridges, the mountains, that naturally, I believe, unlocks in people something that is inspirational, that is different. And what we do is we bring the Maasai, we bring indigenous people in to teach. Because for thousands and thousands of years, they have been able to understand the problems they're solving. And what I believe I have managed to do through this methodology, which is totally open to all of you, is to use these natural metaphors deep inside us of what are we hunting, protecting, and growing? What are those rivers, mountains, and swamps our business needs to overcome? And how do we earn our seat at our customer's fire? Or who sits around your fire? And just with these simple metaphors, It's possible to really, really unleash people's motivation, help them work out what they're seeking, what they're protecting, what they're growing, and ultimately how they can be more successful as individuals, as business leaders, and corporates. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Brilliant. Excellent. So I think this is sort of fascinating way of looking at how you create teams and solve problems, and you can hopefully see how motivational maps and territory mapping actually complement one another. Motivational maps help people understand what it is that really drives them, and then once they know that, they can think about how that transfers into where they're trying to get to, and how they're trying to solve problems for their team, their business, and an organisation. So that's territory mapping and motivational mapping. We are we're going to be together next week, aren't we, Anthony? Do you want to tell us a bit more about
Well,
that?
yeah, I'd love to. I mean, as you can see, that was just a brief thing, but I've been doing it for 25 years. So I've worked on all 5 continents. I haven't been to South America, but I've done a lot of mapping in Africa with family businesses, in the Middle East with businesses there, and in Australia and elsewhere. So it totally crosses all barriers. But people have normally been using it in isolation for a workshop to get clarity as a leader for a new project. So
Mhm.
what I'm now looking at, and obviously, Mark, this is where we're talking, is how can we partner? So what I really want to do is to partner with people, but I can be enthusiastic about mapping. But what you really need, I believe, is to talk to other people who've been using it. So what I'm doing next week, I'm bringing together 25 people who've actually used mapping, who want to use it in their own work, who want to really bring together a cadre of people who can try it out for themselves, try it out with others, and then start to talk to each other about how we could use it. Because I think what we've lost today is this ability to have context in our conversations. I own a Ferrari, so what? What does it say about you? I certainly don't own a Ferrari, and I'm certainly not allowed to wear my Rolex. But, you know, what is it that I believe we need? And I think it is having a conversation that has context and that we can be listened to. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm bringing people together to this hotel in Amersham, which is really nice, for 2 days. And it's so great. You'll be there and you'll be able to meet people and talk about motivational maps, and how they can use the motivational maps to get some measurement, and how they can use the territory maps to get some emotional buy-in.
Mm.
So that's
I
really
think,
what.
and it's such a relevant thing at the moment. I think, was what's going on. People want more purpose. They want to know where they're going. They want to know where they fit in, like you've just talked about. And I see it time and time again. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was how technology allows people to work the way that they want to work, and that's the way we should be looking at things, rather than constraining people. Give them opportunities to do their best work in the best way that suits them. So really looking forward to next week. And if you want to come along, then get in touch with myself or Anthony, and we'll give you all the details to join us in Amersham next week, on Wednesday and Thursday next week. And anything else you want to add before we finish up, Anthony?
No, not really. I just think that this is a new way. Not everybody's using it. Some people think I'm mad, but that's fine. No, it's just let people try it. Just get a blank sheet of paper, draw a squiggly line as a mountain or a river or something, and just see which side are you on.
Yeah.
Draw a fire. Who's sitting around it with you? Um,
Mm.
just start working out simplification. What is that mammoth you're chasing? Is it fame, fortune, recognition, identity?
Mm.
Getting your children to university, or having a good conversation with them? We've all got the challenges. How do we simplify it down to where I can say, I need some help, please? And I really welcome it. I haven't got the answers. The answer's in everybody. And I believe the answer is facilitated by a map and some honesty.
Brilliant. Okay, so if you catch this on replay, which I know a lot of people do, then put a comment in and below this, and we will pick that up and we'll reply if you've got any questions about that. You know where to find us. You will probably watching this on LinkedIn or maybe YouTube or wherever you see this. Feel free to get in touch with either one of us, and we'll put you in the right direction and help you as best we can. Thank you, Anthony, for your wisdom today. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to next week. And until that time, we will say cheerio and have a great day. See you whenever we see you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thank you.